Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Buenas tardes a todos. My name is Saba, and I am the Special Projects Assistant here at Centro and the host of this very special library lunch hour, which also happens to be the first library lunch hour of the year. We're joined today by documentary filmmaker and president of Balestra Media, Christina DiPasquale, and Centro Library Manager Aníbal Arocho, as they discuss the groundbreaking PBS series executively produced and hosted by Humberto Cintrón, Realidades. Realidades aired from 1972 to 1977 and was the first national Latinx public affairs television series to document Latinx life, arts, and entertainment. Christina is working on the documentary Barrio Television, telling the untold story and the history and impact of Realidades, and has worked extensively with the Realidades papers that are housed here at Centro. After today's discussion, Aníbal and Christina will open the floor to our audience for Q&A, so we encourage you to bring your burning questions and hold them for the end of this event. So without further ado, I'll hand it off to Aníbal so we could get started. Thank you.
Thank you, Saba. And welcome everyone to a new year of our library lunch hours. Our first year of the library lunch hour was very exciting, and I think we laid a really nice groundwork for what the Central Library and Archives is, what we try to do, what our collections encompass. And what I wanted to focus on for this next year was the researchers and the products that are produced using scholarship that takes place at Centro. And when I had this in mind, one of the first people that I thought of was Christina DiPasquale, and the work and the passion that she had for a groundbreaking series like Realidades, something that unfortunately maybe the younger generation doesn't know much about, and programming that really doesn't, there's nothing like it on television now for Latino audiences. And so I wanted to invite Christina to speak about the whys and hows of this, how this research occurred, why Centro of all places, and just to share a little bit more about the legacy of Realidades, her project, and Humberto's work, who was integral to that. Humberto Cintrón, we have one of his books here, Frankie Cristo. He's an important person, seminal individual in the history of East Harlem, and also in the media. So Christina, thank you for being with us today. And I guess my first question to you would be, how did you come to start using Centro and the Centro Archives?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for hosting me, and thanks everybody for joining. This is actually my first public talk, and I'm like so excited to see so many people have joined for this, and including a lot of Realidades creators too. I see Delcia Pagan is on, and Rockefeller Archives. And everybody's just been so generous contributing their memories with me. So I don't make films for a living, and I'm not a scholar, but I found so many amazing things at Centro that I did really want to do this talk, because I think that what I was able to find so far, building on what a lot of other folks have documented and saved and housed here at Centro, really, it is taking a new life now, and a lot of people are interested in amplifying it, and we're seeing a lot of ways for it to work today in current campaigns for Latino media advocacy. So that's actually what I do as my primary job. I'm a Latino media advocate. I work with groups like the National Hispanic Media Coalition and others who are doing some of the same work that the creators of Realidades did back in the 1970s. Protests of networks, of communications regulators, license challenges. And as everyone here knows the media is still very insufficient to support our voices, and there's a lot that still could be done to make media work for all communities, particularly Puerto Rican and Latino communities. So that's where I come from on this topic. That's why I wanted to know more about Realidades. My interest was first sparked reading a little bit about it in a few books. Sean Noriega's book, Shot in America, mentioned it. Christopher Bell's book, which is there at Centro also, East Harlem Remembered, with some oral histories. And Joe Torres and Juan Gonzalez also mentioned the series in their book, News for All the People. So when I went to Centro, I was really hoping to see more of Realidades, learn a little bit more about it. When I came to it, all I had really understood about Realidades was that it was a groundbreaking series. It was one of the first, later learned the first, for Puerto Ricans in the metropolitan New York area, later the first Latino bilingual show in the nation. And I knew that it started with the occupation of a television studio. So I was like, I have to know more about this. It's very cool. And the resources at Centro that were really pivotal. So I really used all of the collections to find out more about it. There were DVDs with Realidades episodes on it. There were boxes of manuscripts that people had saved of the Puerto Rican Media Action and Educational Council, and a lot of things about the negotiations with WNET. Oral histories that Centro had filmed and recorded, including with Humberto Cintrón, Dilcia Pagan, Marcos Dimas. Centro Journal gave me a lot of clues. Blanca Vasquez wrote some incredible articles about this that taught me a lot. Lillian Jimenez also, and those were both published in Centro Journal. And the photographs of Maximo Colon really showed a lot too. So really there was no type of collection at Centro that I didn't use. And I got a lot of advice for navigating archival collections there and generally. And since Centro, I've been to about a dozen other archives across the country to piece more together.
That's a phenomenal story to you could share your journey with how you came to put this project together, and it really did start with just a conversation between us in the library reading room, and I'm glad that that we were able to provide a host of resources, as you mentioned, and really what I like to highlight is that Christina is the ideal use case of using the entire spectrum of resources that are available at Centro, archival collections, DVDs, journal articles, books. Yeah, like definitely she was one of our patrons that had everything spread out and on the table, and was sitting at our AV terminals, listening, watching DVDs. Another thing that really stuck out to me is that even when you weren't conducting research, that you would periodically send me updates about some things that you found at other archives. And because the Centro was the beginning, but it certainly wasn't the end. Can you share some of the other things that you found at some of the other organizations that you did research at?
Yeah, I would really like to talk about that, because I think that's just, this is really my joy was the archival research. And so first, I think I want to I'll mention like why the collection at Centro was so important in what I found next in just a few different categories, just so people can get a sense of what the archival journey is like. So the DVDs that were at Centro, there were, I think, about a dozen. And we know that Realidades was a 4-season show. 2 was as a local show, like I mentioned before, the first for Puerto Ricans and Spanish speaking in the New York area, and then the second was as that national show. So what I needed to find out, because what I'm hoping to do with this project, even if it's not a finished film, I wanted to make sure that we could find all of the episodes, as many episodes as possible, and put them and make them available for anyone to see, make them available at Centro, make them available publicly. So what I had to do was find out what episodes we didn't have and then try to find those season by season. So with the ones that I found at Centro as basically the backbone, I went to WNET and I went through about 5 years of newspaper channel guides to reconstruct how many episodes were aired each season, because that can differ, right? So I needed to know how many, which ones were there to find out which ones we were missing to properly search for them by title. So going through those 5 years of channel guides, I was able to figure out how many episodes aired in each season and then which ones we were missing. And then I kind of enlisted, there's a group called the American Moving Image Archivists for like basically a nationwide search for Realidades episodes. And we found over 30 now. So that was really exciting. And so in that process, I did go to WNET, the Library of Congress, the American Archive of Public Broadcasting. And the really amazing thing that happened that I want to share with folks here, and I can drop a link in the chat, is that after we found these episodes and I was able to talk to the American Archive of Public Broadcasting about it and the episodes that we found, they put dozens streaming online, free, available for the public. So now everyone can watch more episodes of Realidades from home. So I'm just going to drop that link in the chat in case folks do want to watch that. But this was about a year's worth of archival work, but then they put that on there. So that is really exciting. So now more people can see it and see more of it. The other thing that happened was that the Library of Congress really wasn't aware that this started as a Puerto Rican show. And so they were doing an exhibit called Latino Empowerment in Public Broadcasting. And they contacted me to learn more about the show, how it started, the occupation of the television studio, more things about what Realidades did to hold television accountable to the community. And I was able to connect them with Centro for more materials, with Maximo Colon about the photographs. And they actually made Realidades a focus point of this exhibit that they just put online, finally really acknowledging the history of protest that went into starting and sustaining the series. So I just dropped a link in the chat to that too. The other places I would say were most significant for the research that really led to a lot of this was also a conversation that I had with Aníbal, because one of the newspaper articles from the time, I'll drop this in the chat too, this is the New York Times newspaper article about the takeover of the studio. In that article, they mentioned that the author, Pierre Thomas, was there and was prepared to read the speech, directly appealing to public television's audience for support for airing the series. And I didn't know if in the article it says that moments into the speech, the station cut the sound and turned the cameras away, and no one was able to hear it. And I was like, it'd be so cool if, like, I wonder if that speech was ever written down anywhere, if we could get it. So I asked Aníbal, right, if you guys had it, and you're like, no, but his papers are at the Schomburg, why don't you try? And so I went to the Schomburg, and they have about 6 boxes of his manuscripts. And obviously he's such a prolific writer and activist and everything else. There was a lot to go through. And unfortunately, I think I was on that like 6th box and I was getting like very discouraged. I was like, I don't even know if this was even written down. What am I doing? I'm like obsessed. I need to stop. But I found it. So his speech was actually there on a single piece of paper, what he read. And it was like super exciting, and it's super exciting to think that we can bring that back to audiences now that can finally be heard and read and experienced. So, that's just like one more example. And then I think the other 2 last archives that I would say are really significant. One was the WNET papers are housed at the University of Maryland. And that's where the WNET executives from the 70s, like their personal papers, what they saved. And what they saved was very interesting because there was actually a folder. The president of WNET had a folder that was specifically labeled Puerto Rican pressure. And he just put everything about Realidades in this folder. So it's like all of these like angry letters and license challenges and bad negative press in the articles and just all sorts of commentary and things to the board. So that was pretty fascinating. And it really helped me get to the bottom of what happened in that second season, which was a very short season when the funding ran out. And then there was a hiatus before it became a national show. And then the last thing I'll mention is the Rockefeller Archives, just because sometimes funders will find too, they keep their own records, and those are often elucidating as well. And what was interesting there was, well, a couple of things. That first of all, even as a local show, I learned that Realidades was actually aired in 9 other cities on the East Coast. So it's broadcast all over the East Coast. I learned a little bit more about the rating system, because one of my favorite things about Realidades was not just the historical importance and the breakthrough episodes and pioneering bilingual subtitles, all sorts of things. But another thing that is very, very important to me, especially now, is that all of their content was determined with the expressed wishes of the Puerto Rican community. They were always in conversation with the community about what they wanted to see on television. When they went national, they also, on a volunteer basis, issued surveys to different Latino communities all over the US, and they asked people, what do you want to see? And then they delivered on that. And I think that's really important, and that was in those papers. Another small detail that will just tell you a lot about Realidades and the thought that they put into it was they had worked out a deal with a radio station in the early seasons to simulcast the episodes over the radio, so that even people who didn't have a television could get their public affairs programming. And that's just the kind of series that Realidades was, and why I think it's so important to bring, back public attention now as we reimagine media that works for our communities now. Is there anything else in the Rockefeller? Oh, and the ratings. This was one other thing. I mean, the whole time I was also kind of secretly hoping for some viewer letters or, something else, which is why I kept searching to see if that was saved anywhere. And while I still haven't found viewer letters, I found a rating sheet. And this came out, so, in the 70s, again, like Puerto Rican and other Latino audiences were not measured by Nielsen ratings or anything else, which was one of the difficulties in keeping shows like this on the air, because they had no sense of, Spanish speaking audience and how large it was and what they wanted. So there were some attempts at measuring that. But one thing was a rating sheet that I found from the first season, which showed that with a very tiny fraction of the budget compared to other $1 million budget shows airing on WNET at the time, which some people here might recognize, the 51st State, Bill Moyer's Journal, things that had like some serious station cash behind it. Realidades remains competitive with all of those much larger, much more well-financed shows. And that's without measuring the Latino, Puerto Rican, or Spanish-speaking audiences in it. So you can just imagine really the impact that it had now finding some of these papers.
I mean, it's phenomenal. I get like goosebumps thinking about just the through line that you took in order to find what it was that you were looking for. And I definitely remember our conversation about the Schomburg Center, and how I always like to tell researchers, like, Centro is a resource, but we are not the resource. But what we can do is that we can put you in part of the services that we provide is that we can link you with other institutions that might have coverage of what you're looking for. And I'm so glad that you found that Peter Thomas speech at the last box, and it's also like you got to, the nature of archival research can be frustrating, but it can also be really brilliant when you have that moment where you find the thing and you make those connections. It's spectacular. And what also really speaks to me is the fact that through the process of your archival research, that you brought things to light that had been forgotten for generations. And through your archival research, Realidades is now more available than it's been for a couple of decades. Like, people saw that there was interest in this, that you had an interest and an investment in it, and then they become interested and invested as well. It's almost infectious when people see like, oh, what is it that you're actually trying to do with this stuff? And in many cases, materials that people haven't worked with for years and years. It does really create that energy. And I think that is really drawing from the energy that went into creating Realidades. Like, you're sort of bringing that energy back as well, which is something that you don't really think about. What people don't really think about is sort of the passion that goes into a lot of archival research. They think it can be very dry and filled with dusty papers and images and things like that. But nothing could be further from the truth.
True. That's very true. And and the other thing about Realidades was, they weren't like these seasoned, television producers and media makers and filmmakers. A lot of the things that, they did, they taught themselves, and then they trained others, and that's how they created this wave. And so, this has been really challenging for me because a lot of these are very new skills for me. But I just think back to, them getting a show and figuring it out, and, and how important that was to, a community. And it is really hard now. And I, when I'm sharing this story and with other Puerto Ricans, other Colombians like me, other Latinos, and they're just like, how have I never heard of this? This is horrible. Yeah. And I'm like, I think it is horrible. And one other thing, because I also do want to combat this idea that archival research is boring or even inaccessible. I think that, before I went to Centro, I didn't know I could just walk into an archive and ask for someone's papers and just sit there I just want to look at Pierre Thomas's papers all day. I can do that. Cool. So I didn't even know I could do that. And again, I am not a scholar or an academic or professional filmmaker or anything, but it has come up again. And one other thing that I just want to mention that was also kind of on the level of excitement of the occupation speech by Pierre Thomas that I also had the lead on from Centro Journal was in Centro Journal, Lillian Jimenez did an oral history with Jose Garcia, who produced the pilot episode of Realidades. And he spoke a little bit to some of the controversies of the series. And he mentioned an episode that at that point I had never heard of about the coup in Chile. Mm-hmm. And he said that it was so controversial, he was fired from Realidades and mm-hmm. they burned the episode. And I was like, what? And he also mentioned it was on the front page of Variety for a week. I was like, the front page of Variety? I'm like, okay, well, I can do this. This was 1973. I can figure this out. I went to the Brooklyn Public Library. I got some librarians. I'm like, can I go through, Variety of 1973, looked through the years with my associate producer, Madison, who's also on the line. And we found it. And it's there. And it's the front page of Variety. And what it said was, first of all, that Realidades, the program that they did on the coup in Chile in 1973, was the first and only in-depth look at the coup by any U.S. television network, anyone. And in that article, the WNET president and other officials also said that this was bias. It was too, laudatory of Allende. They didn't really know what the military junta was doing. It wasn't fair to say it was a really bloody coup. They had all these issues. They fired Jose Garcia from the show. They also fired him from an independent teaching position that he held at a university. And in that article, they said they erased the tape. They literally said that. They said, we erased it. We plan to re-air it. We're not going to, and it's erased. and you can never see it again. Because Variety said, I didn't see anything objectionable about it. I thought it was fair, but I'll watch it a second time if WNET sends it to me. And they were like, it's erased, can't do it. I was like, wow, this is crazy. And when I went to WNET to ask them for everything that they had of Realidades, it was in there, not erased.
There you go.
So I told AAP about it, the American Archive of Public Broadcasting, and at that link that I shared, they posted it. So
Awesome.
it is available now. But one thing that Realidades always did was, challenge institutions. And so in that episode, they called out 2 multinational corporations that were operating in Chile and financing the military junta, and they called them out on the show. And it turned out, and I found it out in the WNET papers in University of Maryland, that those 2 multinational corporations were also corporate sponsors of public television.
Of course.
Specifically. So it's just wild. I mean, like, really, the history has been a wild, very fun run.
And it feels very now, like it, I mean, corporate interests being invested in public television and public goods. I mean, that's something that we're seeing now. Just phenomenal, just the research that you've done. I want to take a moment and talk about some of the individuals that were behind Realidades. And you had an opportunity to work with some of them. Do you want to share a little bit about your personal interactions with Humberto?
Sure. Yeah, I have been able to meet so many people. I'm actually, I kind of, let's see what the best way to go about this is. I kind of want to talk about maybe on like in a way of like the journey and how I met each person.
Sure.
Some of the cool things.
Yeah, so take us on that journey.
Okay. So again, starting with Centro, and really, I think that the first folks that I met were Marcos Dimas, Taya Boricua, who did put me in touch with Humberto Cintrón, and also let me use Taya Boricua for free for a filming location. So I can save money while I'm using my savings to film some of this stuff. And he also told me about, a lot of the other producers involved and gave me some leads in contacting them. And because I had seen Maximo Colon's photographs at Centro, I was also able to reach out to him, and we went through those photos and other ones that he was able to find and develop, including inside of the station occupation. And then I think Maximo put me in touch with Eulogio Ortiz, who was assistant director on the show. Well, he was a production assistant and also worked his way up, but one of also the original creators. And Eulogio put me in touch with Raquel Ortiz, who went from production secretary to, by the end of it, series producer. So she had a lot of memories of, because, each person was there maybe, for a season or two, and then there were some that were multiple seasons, but everybody has different memories, based on the things that they were working on and, in charge of at that time. So Eulogio and Raquel were able to tell me a lot about the process of pioneering the subtitles, which was major in that time because they were working with what was the first character generator in broadcast television. So the things that have the, the type and the images that you see, what they call like the chyron now and the headline, that was something that they had to develop on their own, with engineers at WNET. And it's just so fascinating. And, later contributed to the development of what we see now as captions for the hearing impaired. So a lot of different contributions. So then from there, they're also helping me get in touch with other people. But about that time was also when I was able to meet Humberto, and we met over Zoom, because this is also like during the pandemic too. So, I can't meet a lot of folks in person. I can't, couldn't do a lot of the filming with the quality that I wanted to during that time. But we had a lot of time for conversations, and Humberto and his wife, Luz, helped, also contribute to like memories and things that happened and how they not just won the show, but all of the work that went into sustaining the show. And so that was really important. And then I was able to talk to the really incredible media scholars, Blanca Vasquez and Lillian Jimenez, and Esperanza Martel. And those women really told me a lot about the women leadership that powered Realidades, that got it off the ground, that helped organize community support. And then there's the advocacy piece. And so Elogio also introduced me to Dilcia Pagan, who's also on the line. She was the first woman producer of Realidades. And, she has so many accomplishments. Like, this is like one that people know. Every time I say that, she was a part of the show, everyone's like, what? Dilcia Pagan was on Realidades? I'm like, yes. And, at the very beginning, when a lot of the things, more innovations. So she worked on some very important and innovative episodes, and she's on, so I won't go into it too much. She can talk about them on her own, but I will say that two of the things that stand out were things that she produced in the first season included a Puerto Rican election special, which made Realidades the first series to broadcast live, direct from Puerto Rico, a program on the island's election returns. And that was completely new, the total first. And also, as I mentioned before, there's a lot of community support for the series. So one of the very first episodes of the series, which Dilcia produced, Fiesta Boricua, was a very technically challenging live studio concert, and undertaken to thank the community for their support and talk about just Puerto Rican music and culture and the roots of that and their contemporary imaginings. And it had Hector Lavoe, it had Willie Colon, who was Realidades' musical director, and Dilcia brought a lot of these celebrities and and other just support for the show that ended up being really pivotal in carrying it through to a national series. And we're still looking for a couple of the other episodes that she produced. One, a Three Kings episode, which had an animated story, and it had Rita Moreno in it, and Raul Julia, and so it's another one we're looking for. I saw she was there recently, but other really great ones. And I don't know who else I'm missing, but I mean, there's so many people involved. I mean, I think the important thing is so many people involved, so many groups involved, such a collective effort, such a community effort, all just so many Puerto Rican groups who are active in all kinds of activism at the time contributed. They all realized how much better media, local media, community-driven media mattered for the community. And no matter what they were working on, they really got behind this series. So it's sprawling.
Christina, honestly, I'm really glad we got to have this conversation. I wish we had more time to have this conversation, but we're going to dedicate the last 5 minutes to question and answers. And again, I'm going to put in the chat a link to your project, Barrio Television, and it has a great slideshow about your process and the rationale behind why you did what you did and the research that you undertook. So right now we have 3 questions in the Q&A queue. People, if you have questions, please place them in the question and answer. We have Blanca Vasquez said, can you allow Realidades organizers present to identify themselves or call them out? I'd like to know who beside Dilcia is present. I met her precisely at Realidades. So if you were associated with Realidades, please say hi in the chat and make yourself known. Thank you so much for your efforts in Realidades in what is still a groundbreaking program. We have Jose Velasquez. Hi, Christina. Were you able to locate a documentary titled Puerto Rico Paraíso Invadido, made in the early 70s by Garcia? Not sure if it was part of the Realidades series.
No, actually, I have not heard of that one. It wasn't in the episode logs as part of Realidades, but definitely important to find. It was actually kind of a challenge to find some of the things that Jose Garcia produced. I did find the pilot at NYU, La Carreta, the ox cart, and a couple other ones that he produced and directed, but not that one, unfortunately. But I hope you find it.
All right. Basilio Serrano says, a program broadcast from the Dominican community was also called Realidades. I believe that it followed the original. Okay. Jose Velasquez, are there mediums where the films can be reshowed? This would be wonderful. Maybe Centro can start a TV channel. Christina linked to some of the archived episodes, so those are definitely some of the episodes are definitely available online. Centro has a rather extensive collection of Realidades episodes on DVD. Christina actually helped us discover that we're missing quite a few, but we look to complete those at some point in the future. Centro does have its own television series, Puerto Rican Voices. So maybe we can roll that out further. That'd be really great. Angel Roman said, can you say anything about the training program?
Yes, the training program, thank you for the question, is also something that was is very cool. So there was one at WNET Channel 13 at the time that my interviewees tell me was started by Ellis Hayslip, who was the kind of head of the program Soul, which was one of the first series that was aired, and it aired during the same time as Realidades. And by, for, and about the Black community, and that focused on entertainment. There's actually a documentary about Soul now, but at any rate, there was a training program that he helped start at the station to develop journalists of color and other producers of color, and it just filled the gamut of different skills that it taught folks. And I know Raquel Ortiz, who's on the call, was part of that training program, so she can definitely say more. Marcos Dimas, Taller Boricua, also as part of that training program. That's definitely something that we hope to share more about in the future.
Yeah, I mean, it's a whole generation of people that were influenced, not just by viewing it, but also by being able to be trained and participating in it. And you know what I didn't know actually that you taught me was the development of the subtitles. It was fascinating. Like, we take that for granted, and that was such a novelty at the time. David Galarza, great project, Christina. Congrats. Is there anything that remotely approaches Realidades today? And if not, why?
This is definitely one of my primary reasons for getting into it and hoping to show more about it. We still haven't seen one that is so completely bilingual as Realidades on a US television network. Realidades translated both languages. If the speaker is speaking English, the subtitles would be in Spanish, and vice versa. If the speaker was speaking Spanish, the subtitles would be in English. And it was an adult show, and so there is nothing that I've seen or that the creatives have seen that was like that. It's also, one other thing that I think is important to mention was, there was more than just a series. It was also an organizing tool that showed models of successful organizing in the community, so other people, could see that, be inspired about it, see achievements, see how it was done, and I haven't seen anything like that. I mean, when you see some of these episodes, and I really do encourage you to look at the link now at AAPB that I share that has more about them, there are things like, how community activists got control of their own housing complexes via Victoria in Boston. There are programs about the juvenile justice system that's really like a know your rights program that showed people every step of that process and what a parent might encounter in that process, right? Like, these are things like when the Voting Rights Act was extended to Latinos, and a lot of people didn't know that it didn't cover Latinos for a very long time. It explained this is exactly what you can expect from this law. And yeah, I mean, that kind of content I also haven't seen. And, there are a lot of, I think, reasons for that. The one that I'm most involved in right now is making sure that grassroots, local, bilingual, and culturally relevant programs have funding and support from foundations to succeed. And another one that I'm mostly involved in is the regulation at the Federal Communications Commission and developing public interest rules that actually require broadcasters to listen to the communities again, to release diversity data. We haven't seen real diversity data even from public broadcasting in like 10 years. So we need to be able to hold them accountable, and without those tools to hold them accountable and even know, it often makes, greater success a little difficult. But
Right.
I'm partnered with a lot of grassroots groups right now, Latino groups who are eager to be part of a social impact plan that might use this story today to try to get more from the media system now.
Well, Christina, that's gonna be it for all of our questions. Thank you so much. We didn't get to even half of the questions that we got. Thank you so much, everyone. We put links in the chat to make appointments to view the Central Archives and our email address. And you have Christina's website for the Barrio Television project. Christina, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking this opportunity to share your journey with the Central Archives and beyond, and to see where it's taken you and what the benefit that your work has had for our community. This is just one of the many stories that come from the Central Archives. There are lots of people doing research. A lot of times it can be really quiet and really lonely research, but know that there are people working on all sorts of topics at any given time, and that everyone on this attending this webinar, you too can do research at Central. Just reach out to us. So again, thank you to Christina. Thank you so much. I wish you the best of luck on completing your project. I want to thank our interpreters and Central staff, and thank you everyone who attended for taking your lunch hour to speak with us here at the Central Library and Archives. And we'll see you again. I believe on the 22nd, we have another library lunch hour. We're going to be delving into some recent acquisitions at the library. So thank you very much. Have a good rest of the day, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.